most people will not be able to really grasp what I'm about to say initially. They're going to have to ponder this. But in 1582, Pope Gregory he took the Julian calendar. I call it the Orthodox calendar, or the calendar of the East. He took the Eastern sunrise calendar, the calendar of the day, and he changed it for their purposes. They explain it, in all different ways, that they were just trying to make it right. But Pope Gregory in 1582 created the Gregorian, or what's known as the Anno Domini calendar. That calendar is a timeline that is copyrighted by the Vatican. So imagine if September 19th, 1960, a character is born to that timeline, and let's just call that character Curtis Richard Kallenbach. That character is born into a copyrighted timeline. In other words, the Vatican has a legitimate claim upon that title, upon that name. So people don't realize it, but if you're using that Anno Domini Gregorian calendar, in other words, right now it's 2016, you're subjecting yourself to a commercial. It was created for commerce. It's called the Western calendar for a reason, or the New World Order calendar, whatever you want to call it. But it was designed to own the characters born to it. In fact, why don't I do this real quick, as long as we're going to be talking a little bit about words. The first word I just want to talk about real quick is literary property, because when you realize that Curtis Richard Kallenbach is a character within a copyrighted story, then you'll realize that the author, i.e. Pope Gregory, owns all the characters born to that timeline. So let me just go to literary property real quick. I don't want to do this, the whole hour, but there's just a few words that have to be known to these people. Literary, where is that here? I'm going to Black's. This is Black's Law Dictionary, 5th edition, by the way. It's not, to most legal scholars, the Black's Law Dictionaries are not considered law dictionaries, but they are the language of the Bar Association. So I'm trying to be clear that even though the Black's Law series is not considered a legal or a law dictionary, it is a dictionary of legal terms used by the bar out of the District of Columbia. So here we go. Literary property. And this is going to actually explain why they can make a claim. Here it is. Literary property may be described as the right which entitles an author and his assign to all the use and profit of his composition, to which no independent right is, through any act or omission on his or their part, vested in another person. Literary property is the exclusive right of owner to possess, use, and dispose of intellectual productions. The term denotes the corporal property in which an intellectual production is embodied, and may consist of letters, lectures, sermons, or addresses. Now, I said, in the book here, it says the term denotes the corporal property in which an intellectual production is embodied. Think about this. Everybody knows Harry Potter. J.K. Rowling is the author of all the Harry Potter novels. If I woke up tomorrow morning and put on the clothing, the character of Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling has a legitimate claim upon everything I do by wearing that character. If I get up tomorrow morning and put on the character of Curtis Richard Kallenbach, the Vatican has a legitimate claim on all the production, all the productivity that I create while wearing the clothing of their character. People have no idea how bad or how misguided we've been. And I'm just talking very superficial. I'm talking about subject. I haven't even got into the concept of matter, i.e. subject matter. The subject is Curtis Richard Kallenbach, and that subject was born to a timeline that has a copyright, and it's had a copyright since 1582 when Pope Gregory created that world, because it is a world. So anyway, that should get us started.
Yeah. Yeah, I throw this one in. Was it Napoleon that said history is a lie that we've all decided to agree upon?
And you know what? I joke about it. I mean, if people go to the website, they're going to see a lot of these little whiteboard presentations. But I joke about the concept of his story. And in the beginning, i.e. Genesis, that's not the beginning of reality. I mean, that's the beginning of a story. And people don't realize it, but the Bible is a copyrighted piece of literature as well. And there's a copy hold on that piece of literature. So again, if we're choosing to live by these stories, we're going to be, well, subjecting ourselves to the stories or the copyright owner or holder of these stories. So it's pretty dangerous to believe in this kind of nonsense.
Mm.
I'm not trying to offend anybody, but it's pretty dangerous.
No, we're just looking at the way the laws read and the way the whole society has been arranged for us before we were born. That's what people don't understand. When they're born, they come into the world, and they learn from their adults and learn from everyone else how to think and what to do, what not to do, and what's right, what's wrong, but never realizing, because you're born into it and you wouldn't know any different, that there's a whole world of knowledge you haven't been told. Who created the world around you, who created your reality, and you're born into it and didn't realize somebody else is in charge of your life. And because you don't understand how it works, you don't understand, and I talk about that a lot, meaning to stand under the foundation of the world to understand. So, yeah, go on about talk to us about the law and commerce too, if you because I know there's a lot of stuff in there we don't know too.
Well, what they did, and when I say they had to create a commercial position. I mean, in fact, the Anno Domini Gregorian calendar is the calendar of commerce. So that character that they create is a commercial character. Its entire existence is based on that. In fact, they use that name or that character they syndicate it. They syndicate the name, so it's just like Charlie Brown. Everybody knows Charlie Brown certainly if they're our age. But Charlie Brown, he had his little comic strip that came out every morning. A syndicated strip. Every morning when I wake up, I put on a character. My character's syndicated. So the whole idea about wearing that character is as long as I'm going to use one of your words or very similar, subscribe. To subscribe is to underwrite. Subscribe, underwrite. So if I get a subscription to the character Curtis Richard Kallenbach, if I wake up to that delivery every day, I subscribe to it or underwrite it, which makes me the guarantor. I become the one that guarantees the payment when that name comes up. Like if a cop pulls me over, all the credit system is based upon it. So that name is the commercial element. That's what they're using, that they're using that title, that name, in commerce. Without that name, they have nothing, because that's the name that they're using. But here's the scary part. So that's the subject. The subject is the name or that character within that story or that timeline. Here's the scary part. Just like when you hear in court cases, the subject matter jurisdiction, there's a subject and there's the matter. The matter is the part that's kind of crazy. I mean, I can sort of buy into the idea of the name or the title. That seems pretty easy. The scary part is how they attach it to me. How do they attach that name to me? Well, I'll have to give a little story here. So my mom goes into the hospital, Swedish American Hospital, Rockford, Illinois. She's carrying a package in her womb. And when she steps from Illinois, the Republic, into federal territory, the corporate hospital, does she stop by customs and declare the package at customs? No. When she delivers the package in her womb in federal territory, does she declare that delivery? No. When she wraps that package in swaddling clothes and takes that package home with her and her husband, does she declare that package on the way out of federal territory? No. What is that package that she delivered? That's baby Curtis. That's me. So there's no evidence of my existence from the moment I arrive. That's the weird part. I don't exist on paper. But here's what they do. Since the beginning of time, women, when they deliver a baby, there's a second delivery. It's called afterbirth. And that afterbirth, legally, is a term called born alive. So even though mom delivers me first, I'm the firstborn, there is a second delivery or a second coming. Uh-oh. Did I just say that out loud? The second coming. Here's the scary part about the afterbirth material, is when they take me home, there's no evidence of me at all. So what they do is they take this left behind afterbirth material, the DNA, the actual DNA, and they take that, and because nobody claims it, nobody claims the left behind afterbirth DNA material, that gets salvaged. Because remember, we're in our mother's water, and we're delivered through that water. What happens to us? Well, when I'm inside my mother's womb, I'm inside that amniotic sac. That stuff that I'm in, that's mother's ship. That's the vessel in mother's waters that I'm traveling in. When I come out of mother, the vessel I arrived in crashes ashore after I do. So I'm number one, I'm the firstborn, but the number two, I call it the little shit, the number two born, the afterbirth, is the vessel that I arrived in. And it crashes ashore like a wreck, and then they salvage it, Admiralty law, they salvage that wreckage, and that gets a salvage lien put against it. There's your debt. So now there's an unclaimed vessel, the afterbirth material, and what do they do with it? They take the paperwork that my mother left behind, and they apply the name of the paperwork to that vessel. So the afterbirth material now has a name. What is the name of the afterbirth material? In my case, it was Curtis Richard Kallenbach. So Curtis Richard Kallenbach is actually the name of the afterbirth material. Now, let me just prove something to people, because I hate just talking like this and trying to convince people. In Black's Law, 5th edition again, the idea of the legal term called born alive. It says on page 167, being the product of conception after complete expulsion or extraction from mother, irrespective of the duration of the pregnancy, which breathes or shows any other evidence of life, such as beating of the heart, pulsation of the umbilical cord, or definite movement of voluntary muscles, whether or not the umbilical cord has been cut or the placenta is attached. Here's the key line. It says, this is born alive. This is a legal term. It says, each product of such birth is considered live-born and fully recognized as a human person. So all that garbage waste material that comes out of mom after baby Curtis is called born alive, and it's a legal person. Now there's your waste material. Remember, one man's trash is another man's treasure. So they take this waste material, this wreckage. I always think of Amazing Grace. You know, what a wreck. But, I mean, they take this and give it your name. Nobody knows the wiser. None ever can figure this stuff out. And so what we do is that property, that left-behind material, is called a foundling child. Let me do one last. I'm only going to do one more legal term here, and this is the foundling. What is a foundling? This is what that afterbirth material is called. Because remember, when mom and dad take baby Curtis home, there's left behind, I call it the floor sweep. There's left behind DNA, waste material, and it's another child of God. It's all defective. It doesn't have a head, 2 arms, 2 legs, but the church calls it a child of God, so they have to salvage it. Remember, the word salvage and salvation are the same. That afterbirth material needs salvation. Here's what it says for foundling. Foundling, a deserted or abandoned infant, a child found without a parent or guardian, its relatives being unknown. So when mom and dad take baby Curtis home, the left behind child of God has no known parents, the state picks it up, and it becomes a ward of the courts, a charge to the state. There's the charge. Everything is based upon that foundling state-created child. And from that point forward, all we ever are when we show up in a courtroom is a relative of that defective Rain Man character. So there's your matter. So the subject is the name or the title. The matter is the physical aspect left behind in the hospital. So now they have in their courtrooms, their private courtrooms, subject matter jurisdiction. And we can never weasel our way out of it because it has a matching DNA profile. A matching DNA. So even though it's not us, it looks like us. It is us by, for all intents and purposes. So we're in trouble. We're in trouble.
So
from the get-go.
There, where do we go from there then? All right, as we grow into the world.
Well, I think
how does that affect us? In other words.
Completely, because the Vatican lays claim to the afterbirth material. And let me go here. I saved a couple of documents that I put together for tonight. I usually don't use notes, but because I'm with you, I decided to do this. Here we go. And you're going to know some of this stuff way better than most people, but this is Unam Sanctum from 1302 from Pope Boniface VIII, November 18th. And the Unam Sanctum, I'm only going to read 2 lines. The first one is this. It says, I'm trying to find, okay, there it is. The spiritual man judgeth of all things, and he himself is judged by no man. The spiritual man judgeth of all things, and he himself is judged by the spiritual man. In other words, the baby that has both mind, body, and spirit. In other words, the whole baby, the firstborn, is never to be judged by another man. But here's the crazy part. Here's the secondborn. Here's what Pope says about the secondborn. Unless he invent, like Manichaeus, 2 beginnings, which is false and judged by us heretical, since according to the testimony of Moses, it is not in the beginnings, plural, but in the beginning that God created heaven and earth. Furthermore, we declare, we proclaim, we define that it is absolutely necessary for salvation that every human creature be subject to the Roman pontiff. He has, in 1302, remember, the afterbirth has been there since the beginning of time. These mystery school guys, the priests that have been around forever, the afterbirth always followed baby out. This is not new. So what they did, the Pope says the spiritual man, the firstborn baby, the whole baby, the one that has everything, is never to be judged. But it's the secondborn, the second beginning, that is called the human creature. And that one's the subject. That's the one that needs salvation. That's the one that's subject to Rome. The afterbirth character has been, since 1302, subject to Rome. That's the defective child. That's the one that needs salvation. The firstborn's perfect. The firstborn baby's perfect. The secondborn is defective and is subject to Rome. So once you realize that even Rome's not claiming anything upon us. It's we're the ones that are claiming to be the birth certificated person. We're claiming to be the defective. We're claiming to be the afterbirth beast. Remember that afterbirth material, when they collect it in the hospitals, remember the hospitals are all Sovereign Military Order of the Knights of Malta hospitals. So they're right in the mix there. They're collecting all this land, the DNA, the land of the soul. They're collecting it all for Rome. And that collective DNA is the public DNA pool. It's a public pool of DNA. And that collective DNA is the beast, the soulless mass, M-A-S-S, of man. And I call it the Christ Mass, as in Christmas, because the Mass, the left behind matter, does not have the Christ, I am, has no Christ within it, which is why the Vicar of Christ has to be the substitute for that afterbirth material. I know this is a lot to digest for people, but the afterbirth material does not have a soul. It has no soul, which is why it's subject to Rome. It needs to be salvaged. And that's the Christ Mass that everybody's claiming to be part of. Because remember, they're not claiming to be the firstborn. Everybody's using this birth certificate position now, which puts them in the second position as the afterbirth soulless individual. It's a pretty scary position for us, and that's why nobody should be claiming that birth certificate. Nobody should be trying to make any money off that birth certificate. Nobody should be doing anything with that birth certificate because it positions you as the beast. You are the beast.
Yep. That's incredible stuff. But I've heard so many times in the past similar things, and so the words and the terms that you're using, I've heard them used by other researchers and lawyers and people that I've been listening to for years. So I know that you're right on target. It's just a lot deeper than the people I've heard in the past. But this kind of thing, I'm sure, is totally new to a lot of people, and they won't be able to deal with it immediately. But I understand it. I got the point. Because I know that this is how commerce works. This is how government works. There are two names. There's your name in uppercase, all capital means one thing. Your name in capital and lowercase means something else. I know it's very devious, very, very devious, and very interesting the way Rome has had its way. And I've said this before. Rome has dominated Europe for about 2,300 years, starting with the Republic of Rome, then the Democratic Rome, and then finally into the Empire, the Roman Empire. But 2,300 years, Rome has pretty well dominated Europe, and of course, for 2,300 years, Europe has dominated the planet. So all roads lead to Rome, and therefore, when you're talking about law, you're talking about Rome, a Roman law, and this is why we have it's an extraordinary trail or betrayal, I would say, that you have to learn where words come from, and what the words mean when you go into a court. I always say, if you go, why do you have to go to court? Well, you play tennis on a court. How do you play tennis on a court? You play with a racket. And so I was thinking a couple of days ago that Rome has always dominated Europe, and then it just occurred to me, Italy looks like a boot.
Well,
they put the boot in your butt, or they stomp it on or they crush you in a corner with their boot. The boot of Italy has booted Europe. It has crushed the human spirit of Europe and gave birth to, a whole empire. So, there's a whole, that's a whole subject we could get into just with the church itself. My friend, I have another friend that's equally as brilliant on this stuff, and he talks about Rome and the church. Maybe you could talk a little bit about this whole thing called the church. What's your take on this whole thing about the Roman church?
Yeah, this definitely is a good segue, because what I found is it's known as the Latin Arch. Remember, you have Constantinople in the east and you had Rome in the west. You get two different, basically Catholic enclaves. And what they did is the Jesuits, when they were down in South America, establishing their settlements, they got kicked out of everything. I mean, people were dying all over the place down there. What they ended up doing is they ended up moving up into St. John the Baptist, the island of St. John the Baptist, which we know of as Puerto Rico now. Right now, I can almost see the light bulb going off on a lot of people.
Yeah,
because that's where the IRS is.
I'm thinking Pirates of the Caribbean.
You better believe it. Well, what happened was in 1898, through the Spanish-American War, the District of Columbia got, this is all Jesuit stuff, the Society of Jesus. This is how the Catholics actually took over the Republic, through the Jesuits. They established Puerto Rico, this island of St. John the Baptist, which is now Puerto Rico. the United States, I'll call it the District of Columbia, goes into war, the Spanish-American War, and in 1898 they end up getting Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is no different than a Trojan horse. It's a Trojan horse, and then the District of Columbia now is tied to canon law through Puerto Rico, which is still under canon law and always has been. So now you have this D.C. connection, which is the District of Columbia. I have no idea why nobody ever questions the word Columbia. I still don't get it, why that's even acceptable. But the Latin Arch, I call it the Latin Arch because it's not just Catholicism. This is Latin Catholicism. And it came through Ignatius Loyola. And his whole goal, the only thing he's ever tried to do from the beginning of establishing the Jesuits was to capture the soul of man. That was his whole goal, is to somehow find a way to capture the soul of man. And they did. And they did it by, the 14th Amendment citizenry was one way, but in 1933, through FDR, they actually found a way to separate, and this is the segue, church and state. The state is the mind or the lord of the land, and the church is the body, the temple. And so the landlord is the mind and the body together. The birth certificate actually on paper separates those two positions. It separates the masculine or the mind from the feminine, the church, the body. And I'm not saying it physically does it, it does it on paper. Loyola got his wish. He found a way to separate the soul, which is located in the SA node of the heart, which is the body itself, from man himself, his mind. They now have a separation. The state and the church have been separated. And everybody wanted it. Be careful for what you wish for. And so in 1933, they start dispensing or giving out these birth certificates. Well, FDR did something really amazing in 1933, and let me pull it up here. In his inaugural address, 1933, and you're going to appreciate this, Jordan, his first sentence in March 4th, 1933, he says, "This is a day of national consecration." He actually consecrated a nation. What nation? I'll tell you what nation. They created a new nation in 1933, a consecrated nation, meaning holy ground. They made a nation of holy ground. The only holy ground that was established on paper, and it was the separation of church and state. They now created a deed to the holy ground, which is your physical body. That deed is the birth record itself, the birth certificate. So now they have a way to have the land of your soul, which is the temple or your physical body, the house of the holy, so to speak, and they actually created a national place, a nation. Think about it. The nation itself is made up only of the deeded land, or the deeds known as birth certificates, of the soulless afterbirth material. The entire nation is the land itself. The land itself that's being used for that consecrated nation, as spoken of by FDR in 1933, that nation is the holy ground, and that is the physical body or the temple itself. What's weird about that statement is he said, this is a day of national consecration. He created a nation of holy ground. And I'm going to just keep dumping for a minute. Remember that the Sovereign Military Order of the Knights of Malta established the hospitals way back when. And what did they do at those hospitals? When the pilgrims were coming ashore, they were welcoming new Christian pilgrims to those hospitals. The birth certificated afterbirth material, that afterbirth is initiated immediately into the Catholic cult. So every single afterbirth birth certificated person in the world is Catholic. All birth certificated persons are Catholic. I don't care if you think you're a Mormon. I don't care if you think you're a Muslim. If there's a birth certificate out there, that birth certificated person is Catholic. Everybody's Catholic that has a birth certificate. I'm not saying me, but the person that birth record actually belongs to, which is the afterbirth material. Every birth certificated person in the world is Catholic, been initiated into the Catholic cult. That's why the Roman Catholic Church rules over that nation, that consecrated holy ground nation. It's the weirdest thing ever. And if you look at all the photographs, he was completely surrounded by all the hardcore Catholics, the bishops and what have you. But that's not the nation, that's not our nation. It's not the nation most people speak of. That's the consecrated nation. That's the holy ground nation, and it belongs specifically to the Roman Catholic Church. And finally, just to take a breath here, is people don't even know what the Roman Catholic Church is. I'm going to go back. I said I was only going to do 3, but I'm going to do one more. You don't mind, do you?
Oh, no, I wish you would.
Do one last. This is probably the most shocking of all for most people to hear. And I'm going to actually say what the Roman Catholic Church is. And right now everybody has a picture of Vatican City and all these incredible buildings that have been around, these structures that have been around forever. I'm about to blow away that whole idea of the church. Roman Catholic Church. I'm still in Black's Law, 5th edition. By the way, the 5th edition for Black's Law was about I think it was issued 78 or 79. Roman Catholic Church. This will be shocking. Here it is. And I'm going to have some fun with this. Here's the definition from the Roman Catholic Church, page 1194 out of Black's 5th. Roman Catholic Church. The juristic personality of the Roman Catholic Church, with the right to sue and to take and hold property, has been recognized by all systems of European law from the 4th century. It was formally recognized between Spain and the papacy and by Spanish laws from the beginning of the settlements in the Indies, also by our treaty with Spain in 1898, whereby its property rights were solemnly safeguarded. Municipality of Ponce, blah, blah, blah. Everybody missed it. I already know they missed it. Right now, everybody's going, I thought you were going to define the Roman Catholic Church. I just did, but everybody missed it. I'm going to say it 3 times now. Roman Catholic Church. The juristic personality of the Roman Catholic Church. See, everybody missed it. The juristic personality of the Roman Catholic Church, In other words, the Roman Catholic Church is not a physical structure. It's a juristic personality. The church itself is a juristic personality. It's made up of that. The birth certificated person is a juristic personality. And the church is made up of those persons. That's the church. So what they did with this afterbirth beast material is that's what their whole church is built upon. By the way, and you're going to love this, Jordan, the birth certificated person is part of the lunar aspect. Remember, the Western Anno Domini Gregorian calendar is called the Western calendar for a reason, because the sun sets in the west. In other words, the birth certificated person is a person that only lives by the light of the moon when sunset, not the sunlight. The birth certificated person is a lunar cult character. It only exists in the light of the moon when the sun sets below the horizon. That is the Western calendar. It's the world of the dead. The Julian calendar is the world of the sunrise. The Gregorian calendar is the world of the sunset. So it's about darkness. It's about death. It's the underworld. It's the black market. That's why lunacy and lunatic. That's why when the judge says, "What are you? You're a lunatic." It's because the birth certificated person is a lunatic, born to the light of the moon, never sees the light of day, because that's the way it's designed. The Julian calendar is the light of day, it's the sunrise. Gregorian calendar is the sunset. So everybody's living through the world of the dead, the zombie. They're living through a dead, purgatory-based character, the beast.
And I also heard that, because Hollywood is pushing these zombie movies now and zombie shows on History Channel and Discovery talking about zombies. Have you heard anything about the cemetery law, that land, actual dirt and land is under cemetery law, and therefore everyone walking around on land is in a cemetery. Therefore, the only thing that walks around in a cemetery is a zombie. That's very
Oh, my God. I cannot believe you brought that up. I discovered that about 3 years ago, that the consecrated ground is called church ground, and when you look up church ground in Black's Law, it says cemetery. So the entire nation is a cemetery. All of them, remember, they're all tombstones.
That's right.
This is the Western calendar. These characters are born to the underworld, and the churchyard, the church ground, the consecrated ground, is a cemetery. By the way, I looked that up. I dug down deep into that. It's all run by the Department of State, under Parks and Recreation and all that stuff. Bureau of Land Management manages all of the cemeteries. I looked into the laws regarding artifacts. In fact, in the movie The Exorcist, the beginning of The Exorcist is explaining what's happening with the birth certificated person. At the very beginning, they're in a 4,000-year-old Iraqi dig site. I mean, this is the beginning of The Exorcist from 1973 movie. And the Jesuit priest is being called to this hole in the ground where they found something, an artifact. And so they get there, and they, out of this hole, this 4,000-year-old dig site, they pull out this medallion. And this medallion has a picture of what? Of the mother and child. A mother and child. But this medallion's only like 50 years old. So they took a 50-year-old medallion out of a 4,000-year-old dig site. That's exactly like the timeline I'm talking about, where Curtis Richard Kallenbach is born to the Gregorian calendar of Pope Gregory's 1582. Remember, that calendar right now, that Gregorian Western commercial calendar says it's the year 2016. Well, if you believe in the Old Testament, you would be using the Anno Mundi calendar. The Anno Mundi calendar says it's the year 5776. So just the differential between the Old Testament and New Testament calendars says that the calendar that we're currently using, year 2016, is actually 3,760 years in the past, just like the beginning of the movie The Exorcist. So when we use that character, it's just like pulling that medallion out of the hole that's 4,000 years old. We're going back in time. We're stuck back with the Christians in Rome. You know what they did to Christians in Rome?
Go on. I'm sure there's more.
That's the whole idea of this, is that the Christ, the concept of Jesus, or Jesus is just a name, but the concept of the Christ is the idea of the present moment. I am. I am denotes the here and now, right now. In fact, the word grace, Grace, means presence, Presence, presence. In other words, here and now. So to be I am, or to have the grace of God, which is life, you have to be present in the here and now. So the whole idea of I am is right now. If I live through a character, born to a timeline, I am lost in history. I'm stuck or frozen in history. If I choose the grace of God, i.e. life, Live, live, as opposed to evil, the graven image, if I choose I am, or the Christ, I am here and now in this moment as the firstborn son. If I choose the graven image, I'm choosing his story, or the past, the character frozen in time in the past, and that is actually considered disgraceful. It's a disgrace. It's actually against all 10 commandments, just like that. Just by choosing that character, you're going against every commandment, just like that. So again, the word grace means presence, and presence means here and now. And here and now is I am, which is the claim of the Christ. So again, if I don't have the Christ in me, if I'm not here now, then I need salvation. I need to go and bend the knee to the church and ask forgiveness from the church in order to get here now through their character. Because one last thing I'll say about this. It'll all start to make sense when people ponder this, but here's the thing. The Roman Catholic Church takes that birth record for themselves. In other words, they take the deed to that consecrated ground, that the house of the holy. They take the deed to that land, i.e. your body, and they keep it for themselves. So they're basically saying that you don't have a body. And remember, I'll go back to Loyola, Ignatius Loyola, the creator or the one that started the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits. He wanted to separate the soul of man, and he did it on paper, and here's what he did. Think about what is a body without a spirit? It's a cadaver. And what is a spirit without a body? It's a ghost. So what they've done is they've created a place where they've divided, they've taken the spirit out of man. So they're dealing with physical bodies that have no spirit, cadavers, and they're dealing with spirits that have no bodies, which are ghosts. And that's why they call us it's the American spirit, because this country has nobody. Let me say that again. There is nobody here. because nobody has a claim to their physical bodies. So there is no body here in America. It's all spirit. Because the church has taken the deed to the land of everybody in America. And I mean it. Every body in America has a deed called the birth record, and the Roman Catholic Church has that deed in their possession. That's why The Exorcist is about possession. The Roman Catholic Church possesses you through the deed that you believe applies to you. So again, as long as you believe that birth record is valid, then you are being possessed by the Roman Catholic Church. That's what possession is. And as soon as you let go of your claim to that birth record, you are no longer possessed. So again, this stuff, I can go on. And by the way, there's one other thing, St. Thomas Aquinas. St. Thomas Aquinas is basically the material that the church uses in seminary. Would you agree to that?
Yes.
Okay. So I found years ago, I stumbled across the Summa Theologica. And all I did was, I was wondering about the child, the mother's child. And I just happened to type in, offspring follows the mother. And it's funny because Summa Theologica page 4,995 popped up. And this is right out of Catholic Church doctrine. It says, according to civil law, the offspring follows the womb. And this is reasonable since the offspring derives its formal complement from the father, but the substance of the body from the mother. It goes on to say, if a man sows on another's land, the produce belongs to the owner of the land. And the woman's womb in relation to the seed of man is like the land in relation to the sower. They're actually saying that the product coming out of mother's womb is land. That's why there's a deed. That's why the birth record. Because everything coming out of mother, I'm not talking about the firstborn, because remember, the spirit-filled man is not to be judged. But I'm talking right now about the Unam sanctam. But the second-born, defective human creature is subject to the Roman pontiff.